This is Sober Now, and today's topic is managing time and money in recovery. Very much welcome your questions, your comments. Would love to hear what's on your mind, whether it's on topic or not. Streaming today on Sober Now's Facebook page. Would love to have you go over there and give that a quick like if you haven't already. You'll be sure to get notifications about our next live stream and any other content that we put out. Streaming on choosehelp.com today and on several other sites, so please give us your questions and comments. What's going on with you today? Alright, so jumping right into things. Managing time and money in recovery. Many different ways to look at this. The first one is arguably our two biggest resources. I've always said to folks, if you show me how a person spends their time and their money, I'll tell you a lot about their value system, what's important to them. At the same time, both of these are what people often refer to as adulting, and I've always marveled at that expression. So being able to budget, being able to be intentional and organized in scheduling and in managing time. It's a running joke amongst people I know in recovery. We're always 5 minutes late. We tend to be overly optimistic about what we can get done in any given length of time. We tend to not account for things like stop signs or red lights between the place we're at and the place we're going. And we tend to put too much pressure on ourselves to be productive, to get as much done as we possibly can. For a lot of us, it's hard to relax. It's hard to set time aside for and balance that time amongst the priorities that are in our lives, especially when we have competing needs. It all gets a little bit overwhelming, and so I try to simplify things. I try to use the Keep It Simple system in everything that I do. And when I keep things simple, I know that I have responsibilities in my career, I have responsibility to my family and friends, and I have a responsibility to myself. Now, the hardest one for me to manage over my lifetime has been responsibilities to self. And if you're anything like me, you have a far greater awareness of your external commitments than you do to your own needs, your self-care, and in making sure that you take time for yourself, whether that's a little time just to rest, hobbies, things that you really love doing, and making sure that you have time set aside to attend to the very basics, food, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and hopefully some time for reflection, whether that's introspection, taking a daily inventory, having a spiritual practice. All of those are rock solid investments. And I often hear from folks, I just don't have time to do these things. Whenever I hear that, and I know that it's true for some of us. I mean, especially, to the working moms out there, single moms who are managing 1,000 things with very little support, I know that that's real. For some of us, taking care of elderly parents or having commitments that are cumbersome but necessary. I get it. It's not always the case that we have a lot of spare time. But I will ask folks to kind of consider and maybe even keep a log of how much time are you spending on Netflix? How much time are you spending just scrolling social media? How much time are you doing with these things? And it's not like I want to judge that. I want to say, okay, that's time that you have available. Are you using it in a way that's fulfilling? Are you using it in a way that's rejuvenating or replenishing? The expression of not being able to pour from an empty cup. When I don't make time for the people that support me and hold me accountable, I get real squirrely real fast. And so one of the most important things that I've learned about avoiding burnout and compassion fatigue is making sure that I schedule time with those who actively support me and schedule time for self-care. And I say that I schedule it because for a lot of years it was just a good intention. And so for the past decade or so, I literally block off time in my schedule every week If I don't do that, then I've proven that all I have are good intentions with no follow-through. So a few things to think about in terms of how organized are we in our finances and how deliberate are we with our use of time. On the other side of that coin is a caution. When I find that I'm thinking way too much about time and money, that's a red flag for me, because it's a sign of burnout. When it feels like there's never enough time, I need to step back and regroup, because chances are I've overcommitted myself. And this is an easy thing to do, especially when the things that you're getting involved in benefit your community, benefit your program, benefit your family. We're people who often struggle to say no, and so we take on too much, and this leads to resentment because it feels like there's no time for me. I have an awareness that I'm giving far more than I'm receiving. So I think it's an important thing to take stock of on a regular basis. I think it's an important thing to keep simple. There's a part of me that's always a little bit weirded out when people tell me about their financial problems. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been poor. I know what that's like. But I also know that in the simplest of terms, I need to make more or spend less, right? And chances are I need to do both. And if you're working to get out of poverty, I'm rooting for you, because I spent a lot of years there myself. And what I noticed, for me anyway, was that every time I got a better job, every time I made more money, I adjusted my lifestyle accordingly. And that's a double-edged sword. What I've since learned is that I don't have to spend more just because I make more. I've learned that I can be responsible and save. I can make investments. I can do things that are responsible. One of the really cool things about having worked for my wife and I to have moved our family out of poverty was we actually experienced being working class poor. We experienced being middle class. And today we're more of an upper middle class family. And so my kids grew up in all three of those, which provided kind of a unique perspective, but it also provided a skills base. And the biggest skill is that it taught me how to be frugal. And that's a word we don't use very much. To be frugal is to get the most for your money, is to have a strong ability to stretch a dollar. And even in the simplest little things, like learning about unit pricing and how to get the most bang for your buck in a grocery store, those types of budget lessons weren't necessarily imparted on us in the families that we grew up in. So a little bit of online research, a little bit of work with a mentor pays off hugely if you're willing to pay close attention to it. Lots of little things about how we spend money I became very aware of out of necessity. So coffee is definitely something I think of as a necessity, but for the longest time, buying coffee on my way to work or hitting a drive-through at different times in my day to replenish it turned out to be something that added up to a lot of money every month. And so I just made a habit of making sure that I make coffee for my travel mug before I leave my house, having a coffee pot right here in my office. And what that adds up to over the course of a month is hundreds of dollars. And so if we don't have that awareness of where money goes $2 at a time, we can easily develop some unhealthy habits. So just some things to consider. Living within your means is a really cool and responsible thing to do. Having a savings account and a backup removes a lot of the stress of what happens, when the car breaks down, when the furnace breaks down. I'm mindful that overcoming the fear of financial insecurity is actually written as one of the promises in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have found that that is true. Later on in life, when I started my own business, I learned a whole new level of that fear. And I was okay with it until I started having people work for me. And then I was terrified about it all over again. So what I've learned about lessons in recovery is that there's oftentimes multiple levels to the same lesson. And it just gets learned in a new or a deeper way. So again, would love to hear your experience with this. How are you at managing your money and time? What do you find that you struggle with? What kind of skills do you need to add? And by all means, just comment in. Would love to hear from you. I'm also a huge fan of bartering, which is kind of a dying art, but it's something that I learned a lot about from my mechanic. I had the same mechanic for about 25 years, great guy. And everybody in town needs his services, and so instead of just charging people an hourly rate, he would barter with anyone and everyone that he possibly could, exchanging services in a way that lowered his tax liability and increased his support system personally and professionally, which I think is one of the coolest things that we can do. So even little things like swapping off childcare and finding ways to minimize our expenses and maximizing our use of natural supports and shared support is a huge way to realize some financial savings. It's always so striking to me the skill set that people have in active addiction and the ways in which that can be converted into things that are beneficial in recovery. So when a person's in active substance use disorder, their ability to hustle, their ability to beg, borrow, steal, find ways to manipulate, find some source of money to be able to get what our addiction demands, is almost an art form. It's incredible the talent that people develop. And then we kind of abandon that through the course of recovery, and it's great that we're not manipulating, we're not stealing, we're not doing things that are outside of our belief system. But the ability to hustle and innovate and find resources and find a way to make things happen is a pretty amazing skill set, and it's something that I think can absolutely be converted into adaptive life skills in recovery. I actually talk about hustling pretty often because it can be seen as a form of goal fulfillment. I think a lot of us are committed to striving, and we work way too hard to achieve or attain something, and then the minute we do, we just immediately find, okay, there's another goal, there's another achievement, there's something else that I'm going to relentlessly pursue. So striving, I think, really should only be towards ideals, and it's a lifelong pursuit. Hustling is putting my focus on fulfilling a need, doing something out of necessity, and ensuring that I'm doing everything in my power to take care of me and mine, and just applying that little extra motivation, that little extra piece that's frankly done out of necessity, which arguably is the most powerful motivator around. So I encourage folks to just kind of look at what are the skills that you develop through the course of addiction, what are the survival skills that you developed inside your family of origin, how can those be transformed, how can those be things that serve us better, increase our quality of life, increase our health, all potential possibilities. It's also a way of considering the benefits of 12-step fellowships. People from every walk of life go into the programs, and so if there's something that you need professionally, chances are there's somebody you can connect with that provides the service that you need professionally, and chances are that better than average chance that person will be more trustworthy than like randomly finding somebody online to provide a service. Potential greater opportunity to do some bartering or some trade-off of services. And Just one more way to use the program as a resource, but I think that oftentimes gets overlooked because that's not what the program is designed to do. And that's okay. In the context of the fellowship, there's a lot of potential things that the program can do outside of what it was designed to. I often will encourage folks to do a time study when they're struggling. We got 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. So if you do the math on that, you got 168 hours. And then my question is, what are you doing with that time? And let's break it down, right? So hopefully, if you got a good sleep schedule, maybe 50 to 60 hours of your week is tied up with sleep, and maybe 40 or more hours are tied up with work. And then let's add up all your other commitments. And then let's do the math and look at what's left. That time potentially is available for investment. Investing in your recovery, investing in the relationships that are most important to you, and of course investing in yourself. It's amazing to me, the older I get, time seems to pass more and more quickly. And I actually heard a math equation years ago that helped this make sense to me. The older I get, the smaller a percentage that any unit of time actually constitutes in the grand scheme of my life. So a year for me now is less than 2% of my lifetime, and so it seems like a smaller and smaller measurement of time. The older you get, the faster it seems to go. So ideally, you don't do the middle-age crisis thing. You just have an awareness of, okay, we only have just so much time here. How am I going to make sure that I make the most of it? I oftentimes quote a song lyric by 21 Pilots. The lyric is, "Death inspires me like a dog inspires a rabbit." Getting older just makes me more aware of my own mortality and the fact that I'm not going to be here forever. And so I embrace that and think about, okay, what are the things that I most want to accomplish in the time that I have left? What are the experiences? Where are the places that I want to travel to? What are the things that I want to provide for my family? And I think optimally, if you're doing it right, a little bit at a time, you're building a legacy, you're building a better life, you're building a life that's more manageable, more sustainable, healthier, and you're just making the most out of what you have. So, going to check in on the streams real quick. Would love to hear from you. How's everybody doing today? Life is good here. It continues to be good. I am grateful, and that's a huge piece of my attitude and what keeps me going. I certainly would love to have more of what we're talking about today. I've never... How do I want to say that? No matter how much it's an expression I've heard from some old timers in AA. All I've ever wanted was a little bit more than I ever had. That's how the expression goes. And that I've been guilty of that. I manage, on my good days, I'm very grateful for what I have. It's one of the powerful reminders is I spend a lot of time with people who have lost everything. And that forces me to be aware of all the things that I take for granted. So a fair amount of money and time goes into things that I fail to appreciate. The fact that my basic life needs are always met. The fact that I always have a home to go to. That I never have to worry about, am I going to have enough money to have food to eat? Now, for a lot of years, I did have to worry about those things. Those were a daily pressure, a daily problem. And for a lot of years now, they haven't been. And so what I've learned about myself and about people in general is that whatever stays constant in your life long enough, you'll come to view as normal. And as soon as it's normal, it becomes something that you stop thinking about. And the cost of that is that you might take it for granted. So I appreciate the reminders that my higher power sends about, hey, you got it pretty good, and it didn't always, it certainly didn't used to be that way, and so how about make sure you appreciate what you have. Instead, I can be guilty of thinking about the next thing I want or the next level that I want to get to, and of course, nothing good comes from that mindset. Gratitude and attitude have everything to do with each other. So I'm really grateful to have those things in my life. I'm really grateful that my basic life needs are always met, and I'm always grateful that I have more and more opportunities. I certainly have learned that stretching my limits to make more and more money, when it's not out of necessity, it's a bad idea. I can get all the work I ever wanted, and I'm in a field and in a position where there's never a shortage of demand for the services that I provide. But at some point, it becomes blood money, if you'll pardon the expression. It's a bit crude, but it's accurate. There's a point at which you're just sacrificing the quality of your life and your health to get more and more financial security. And I've been guilty of that in the past as well. I've been guilty of doing way too much because I craved the security of having money in the bank more than I valued my own self-care, my time for relaxation, and time for the things that most matter in life. It's so cliche that we actually make memes about it, but experiences and relationships in the end, I know are the only things that matter. But every once in a while, I look at my bank account and think of how nice it would be if there was another 0 or 2 behind those numbers. So that's just where I'm at these days, but overall life is very good. Would love to connect with you. Jim@sobernow.com is the quickest way to do that. Would love to hear questions that you have. If you're struggling in your recovery, if you're finding that there's some barriers in your pathway to recovery, I would love to hear from you and be helpful if I can. Would love to have you check out our YouTube channel. Sober Now has about 120 or so videos on different topics of addiction recovery, recovery from trauma, from mental illness, and topics related to that. Completely free on YouTube. Just hit the channel up, hit the subscribe button, and you'll get notifications for live streams and for future videos. And of course, I'd love to have you check out our site. Sobernow.com has gone to a subscription service for less than $15 a month, and that gets you access to 2 home study programs, one for folks who are pursuing recovery from substance use disorder, and a second one for affected others, for folks like me who have loved ones in active addiction. Learning how to best support the person in your family who's in active use, and learning how to best support your non-addicted family members. The addiction costs us so much globally, but quite often in ways that are indirect or unexpected. And so I want to see folks educate themselves. I want to see folks connect and get greater support for yourself as you're going through those things. So please take excellent care of you as you're going forward. Times are changing, they've been difficult, and hopefully we're coming to a better side of the pandemic. Hopefully things are going to become a little less stressful, but all the more reason to take stock. How are you spending your time? How are you spending your money? Are things balanced in your life? And keep it simple. What do you need to add? What do you need to remove? And that's a great conversation to have with people that support you. It's a great conversation to have with yourself and with your higher power. And I hope that you feel inspired to take better and better care of you. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll look forward to being with you next Thursday at noon Eastern. Have a great